I'll tell you how I got into tattooing. So when I started tattooing, it was 2011. Realistically, the things that made me want to start tattooing were seeing tattoos on my family, my dad. And when Miami Ink got big, I must have been about 13 or 14. Miami Ink started getting big on the TV. And it was the first time that I ever saw tattooing being done. I always wondered how tattoos were done. And that was my first insight into the process and into a studio. So what started off as a bit of curiosity eventually led to, a big interest and eventually a passion in tattooing once I started to see it actually being done. Things were a lot more traditional in these times. So, I knew that doing a traditional apprenticeship was the best way to get into tattooing. I know that I didn't want to be a half-assed artist. I really wanted to be the best artist that I could be. I was always drawing anyway before I actually started tattooing. I knew that I wanted to be a tattoo artist, so I would always draw, and they weren't very good. I thought they were good. That's what kept me going, is that I probably had more confidence than I should have had, realistically. But as much as that was potentially negative because it's somewhat delusional, it served a purpose for a short while because it allowed me to believe in myself enough to be consistent, that I kept practicing and I kept getting better. So this takes a lot of hard work. It takes believing in yourself, but it also takes a lot of hard work to fulfill the belief that you have in yourself. If you don't work hard and you're not actually contributing to the belief that you have in yourself, that's no good. You're just being delusional. So I would always practice my drawing. I was doing tattoo designs for myself and for friends. I was basically simulating being a tattoo artist. I would ask friends, what ideas do you have? What tattoos do you want to get? Let me design it for you. And I was basically consulting friends so that I could get a bit of experience. And I think because I took this path, because I saw so many artists before me draw, and I took that path of drawing, when I see artists that don't attempt to draw, they're learning to tattoo and they don't really care about learning to draw, I know how much my drawing has contributed towards my career, my success, and the quality of my tattoos. So when beginners are missing that step and they don't want to do that level of drawing, I just don't have that level of belief in them like I should. I definitely don't believe in them like I believed in myself, purely because I just know that they're missing out key steps. And it just shows that you're willing to cut steps out and you're willing to cut corners. And that's not the way that I did it when I went to pay my dues in my apprenticeship. Now, paying your dues, you need to understand that it's not just about, being abused unnecessarily. Paying your dues is a little bit about earning your respect and your trust from your mentor so that they feel confident giving you their time and their information. Paying your dues is about helping your mentor and the studio because they're going to help you in return. It's a natural thing in life. You don't get anything for free, right? So drawing is a big part of paying your dues towards your success and the good quality tattooing. It's just a part of the process. So eventually all of my drawings, they accumulated up to building my portfolio, which led me to go and get my tattoo apprenticeship. So my portfolio was kind of built up off of my college work. I went to college after I finished school. I did A-level art, which I got ungraded. I got ungraded at college art. My tutor didn't really believe in me and my ability to be an artist. I felt like it was more like history than art, but I won't rant about that. And so I got an ungraded, but I knew already by now that I wanted to be a tattoo artist. I was just kind of doing my art, waiting for the right time for me to be able to build a portfolio and go and find that apprenticeship. So I was doing realistic drawings in college with tattooing in mind. And as I started to take my portfolio to different studios, I got a lot of negative feedback, got called a few names, had some negative experiences. It was all worth it based off of one positive experience that I had off of a tattoo artist in Bristol. A guy named Ben Boston, who still tattoos today, sat down with me on his lunch break and he told me everything that was good and bad about my portfolio. it changed the path that I was on. He helped me build a portfolio that looked more like a tattoo portfolio. He taught me a little bit about flow and shape and how to create some flash designs that would look a bit more like a tattoo design. And all of the advice that he gave me was spot on. I put that to good work. I went straight back, changed my portfolio. I did loads of new drawings with the new information that he gave me, and I built a new portfolio. I took that to studios, and initially what got me the foot in the door at the initial studio that I worked at, he saw the flash that I did, which was a bunch of Japanese designs in color pencil, and this guy was very much taking a bit of flash off of the wall and doing the flash off of the wall. He didn't do anything custom, so he wanted to buy my designs off of me, and he said, I've got an apprentice at the moment, but I like your designs, can I buy your designs? So I sold him the designs, and I said to him, if your apprentice ever lets you down for whatever reason and you're looking for an apprentice, don't bother asking around, just call me and I'll be there. And literally within a week or two, he had called me saying, his apprentice hasn't showed up, do I want to come in for the day? You know, if I have a good day, he would consider taking me on full time. And that's exactly what happened. I was in the studio within an hour. He asked me to clean, set up, rip up the paper towels, make the tea, anything that I had to do. So experiences like this, you feel like you've really jumped from one stone to the other. I spent so long looking for an apprenticeship with my portfolio, and then boom, just like that, I got a phone call, and within an hour I was in a studio and I was taking in all of this information and trying to be as aware, observant as possible, trying to just learn as much as possible. So it's going to be very overwhelming when you get to that period. I know that I felt quite overwhelmed. Knowing what I know now, I didn't have a good apprenticeship. I wasn't taught very much. I was left to self-teach for the most part. The thing that I was taught most was about cleaning tubes, the autoclave. I didn't learn anything about the needle gauges, the stroke, the voltage, hand speed, stretching the skin. I literally was taught nothing. I was left alone to figure it out for myself. And so it wasn't really the apprenticeship that I wanted, but it was the apprenticeship that I had. So obviously I took it and I just made the most out of it. And throughout my whole apprenticeship, because it wasn't what I wanted, I was still shopping around for other apprenticeships. I was going to different studios saying, I've got a bit of experience, but this is where I'm at. I would like an apprenticeship. A lot of places were turning me away. So I decided that it was best to stay where I was at, because a little bit of learning is better than no learning. And to be honest, I said earlier about me being confident and having like a delusional amount of confidence. You need to really have a good balance of confidence. I've got students that are doing quite well considering how long they've been tattooing, but they're so much in their negative mindset. They're doing so much to pick their work apart. They're almost robbing themselves of feeling progress because they lack in a little bit of confidence. And I'm telling them, you need to build a little bit more confidence so that once you take a step forward and you progress, you can own and accept your new place so that you can appropriately move forward. You see, if you never take the compliment, if you never take the progress and you don't build your confidence, then you're going to hold yourself back. And there's not much that a good teacher can do for you if you're not willing to step into the position that you've earned and that is being given to you. So when I started tattooing, because tattooing can be so complicated and I wasn't guided properly, and I thought I was quite good because of my drawings, I've got an apprenticeship now. And once I started tattooing on skin, it was just so difficult. I really didn't have control over it like I thought I would. And then you almost hit this obstacle where I would go home and I would really have some sleepless nights because I felt so anxious and so bad about the tattoos that I was doing. Even though people knew I was an apprentice, they were getting apprentice rates. But I mean, at the end of the day, I wasn't as good as what I thought I was. And my confidence and my ego probably took a little bit of a hit. And so then, like I said, a balance, a good bit of confidence and the right mindset, you're going to pick yourself back up and you're going to say, okay, let me figure out what I did wrong. Let me improve. Let me be better. Let me figure out the solution to my problem. And developing this mindset means that even when you're 14 years into tattooing like I am, you're constantly looking for ways to progress. But at the end of the day, you're not picking yourself apart and your work apart so much that you destroy the confidence that you've built up. You don't destroy the confidence and the quality you're building up in your career, you know? So I stayed where I was at for the first roughly 18 months of my tattoo experience. Eventually, I left on bad terms because things were happening that I just didn't think should be happening in a professional tattoo studio. Then naturally, I went to a different tattoo studio to look for new opportunities. I made a list of all of the studios that I would have liked to have worked in, and whoever was at the top of my list, I went straight to them for an interview, and I was very happy that they offered me a station in the studio. So things didn't move as quick as maybe I would have liked them to. My first 18 months wasn't what I wanted it to be, but it got me the position in a studio that I wanted. So it wasn't done the way that I wanted it to be done, but I got where I wanted to be eventually. And then because of that, it wasn't until I was about 18 months into tattooing that I was actually learning about machines and needles and what does this mean, what does that mean. And so all of a sudden I've had my eyes opened up, and it really started to make understanding out of something that I was doing but I didn't really understand. All of a sudden the dots started connecting, everything started clicking. And so this is why in my online course or in my Skool community, I always teach my students about drawing and the tools of tattooing, because I was tattooing without fully understanding all of that stuff. I really learned how to draw, and I learned all of the tools of tattooing once I'd already started. So everything started to click because I was getting experience with it. And I personally feel like if someone had run me through all of that before I started tattooing, I wouldn't have struggled so much, because I would have had a bit more understanding of what I need to do to adjust when I was having a difficult time. I was there for about a year. I spent that year traveling, getting tattooed. I went to Miami. I went to go and get tattooed at Miami Ink. You know, that was one of my first experiences of seeing tattooing on TV. And it was just a goal of mine to always go there and get tattooed. So I went to go and get my sleeve done by Federico Ferroni, who specializes in Japanese work. And again, another huge learning experience. I'm just super observant when I'm getting tattooed. I'm thinking about what machine are you using, how many tones are you using, how much black are you putting in each of your grey wash. I'm trying to pick up everything that I can and talk to the artist and just get as much advice as they're willing to give. And so as I'm doing that, I'm going to tattoo conventions and I'm gifting artwork to artists, paying my respects. You know, some people might look at that as ass kissing. For me, I just wanted to pay respect to people that I wanted something from. I wasn't going to go to them and ask for opportunity and ask for advice and not offer something in return. That's just the way that life works. Not even tattooing, that's just how life works. And so because I was getting tattooed by high quality artists, world-renowned artists, I was going to world-renowned tattoo conventions and meeting all of these great artists, I eventually was offered a spot at a studio in Belfast, Northern Ireland, with a very well-respected tattoo artist, one that I definitely looked up to. And I was actually quite surprised to be asked to work at his studio. I didn't think I was at that level yet, because I had been humbled from learning about how difficult tattooing was. All of a sudden, even though I was aiming really high, I didn't think I was there yet. So to be offered an opportunity like that sort of picked me back up again. And it, like I said, I almost owned the position I was given. Someone said, I trust you to be here. So rather than saying, you know, oh, I'm making these mistakes and I don't know, I just said, okay, I'm going to step into that position. I accept. I'm going to go and do the best that I can do. And I moved to Belfast. I completely relocated at 21 years old. You know, I'd been tattooing for about two and a half years at this point, and I picked up and I moved my life to Belfast, Northern Ireland. During that time, I traveled. I did conventions around Europe, you know, Milan, Rome, Barcelona, London. I won some awards, and I really felt like I was building a solid career for myself. I was tattooing locally before. Now I'm tattooing at a different level. This is a whole new stepping stone. Personally, I think 3 years was quite quick, but at the end of the day, for how much I was drawing and practicing, how much I was dedicating myself, I think I just showed what's possible in 3 years. So even though I wasn't a master and I wasn't great, I was definitely holding my own as a black and grey artist in a world-renowned shop that was doing conventions and winning awards, you know. And I moved away for a year. I only lasted about a year. I found it really difficult being away from home and balancing home life and friends and girlfriend, all of this sort of stuff. And so I decided that I was going to move home. Right around this time, we did the Milan Tattoo Convention. I met some artists from California who were opening a studio in London, world-renowned artist called Jose Lopez, and he offered me a spot to go and guest spot at his studio in London. So I was very excited to go and do that. I obviously accepted his offer. Just 1 week guest spotting in London turned into me relocating to London permanently. It suited me a lot more being so close to home. I didn't have to rely on a plane to go home, so I could just jump in the car or jump on a coach and go home for the weekend. So it suited me a little bit more. Plus, I was around guys that were specializing in black and grey. By this time, I realized that I wanted to specialize in black and grey. So relocating to London ticked a lot of boxes for me. By this time, you know, going to conventions, I'm meeting a lot more artists, I'm learning so much and constantly just evolving and learning and trying to keep up with everything that I'm learning, basically. And so my time in Belfast, I feel like it took a negative toll on my mindset and my well-being. At the longest, I was away from home for maybe 3 months at a time, and I just wasn't in a good place. I felt maybe burnt out, and I was so dedicated to my career and being where I wanted to be that I didn't look after myself. I definitely burnt out. I wasn't treating myself very well. And if we're not operating well, then our career just doesn't stand a chance. So make sure that you're looking after yourself. Otherwise, nothing else is going to fall in place. And so moving back home, closer to home, working in London and, you know, dealing with this these new pressures, these new problems that I'd never dealt with before, moving away from home and working so hard. This was all new to me. So I was finding my own way of adjusting. Moving to London, working with those guys, they were very much about, I don't know if it's so much psychology, but they're very much about, you know, the mental game, having a good mindset, seeking a good perspective and a good way of looking at things. And so as I was learning from them, they were obviously trying to pick apart my bad habits to teach me better ways and better techniques. And it's difficult doing that quickly. So they would look over me, they would see me making the same mistakes, and they would ask me, you know, why are you doing it that same way? Why do you keep doing things that same way? And they were really trying to encourage me to take a leap of faith and do things in a way that wasn't my own. They were basically telling me that I'm going to stand in my own way if I don't get out of it and learn how to progress. And I'm telling you that because it did a lot for my mental health and my perspective and my psychology and the way that I look at things. You know, I was trying so much to have control over tattooing. I wanted to do it my way because that was my way of understanding. And I was having a tough time doing something in someone else's way. And my time in London was about not wanting to do things my way, learning new ways and expanding my horizons and almost breaking out of my own shell, not standing in my own way and learning new things so that I could have new results and new opportunities. So again, we talk about stepping stones, not just in my career, but in my life. You know, dealing with my psychology and my mental health. These lessons, they were like going to the gym. I felt the pressure, it felt tough, it didn't feel good, but the results, it built a much stronger version of myself that was much more competent and aware and just willing to do things and get the job done, regardless of what it took to do it. And this way of thinking and this way of being, I'm sure other people in other industries will tell you how beneficial it is being able to adapt this way. So like I said earlier about, having a good balance of confidence, not being too overconfident. Tattooing has taught me so much about balancing things in life so that we can have the best results. There's a price to pay for everything. And I think it's all about getting the best of both worlds. If we want to put in the hard work because we want big results, but we have family and friends and we want to enjoy life, then we really need to allow ourselves time to experiment with how much time we put in to work. We're not going to get it right first time. You're going to go through periods where you're working a lot and you miss spending time with your friends and you feel tired, you feel burnt out. And then you're going to have times where you haven't worked hard enough and you feel guilty and you know that you should have done better. That's just a part of the process. It's a part of the journey. The more aware that you can be and the more that you're willing to try and experiment and adapt and then move things accordingly, I feel like that's the most that you can do in your career. Life itself is changing. Obviously, the tattoo industry is changing so much because life is changing. Technology, AI, the economy. So naturally, tattooing is a small mechanism that is a part of the bigger mechanism that is changing and evolving. So we are a small piece in that, trying to adapt and keep up and just do our best.
The Buzz.